In the heart of Tennessee, amidst the quiet hills and small-town charm, a hidden disaster was brewing, a disaster that would take the lives of many and shake the local community to its core. On October 10, 2025, the quiet hum of a munitions factory turned into an earth-shattering roar as an explosion rocked the Accurate Energetic Systems plant. The devastation was so immense that it could be felt miles away, and 18 people are now missing, feared dead. But amid the horror, there's one survivor whose miraculous escape only adds to the shock. This is the story of the explosion at the Tennessee bomb factory, the lives lost, the search for answers, and the unspoken truths that are only now coming to light. It was an ordinary Thursday morning in McEwen, Tennessee. The sun was barely rising over the hills, and the small town, located about 60 miles southwest of Nashville, was beginning to stir with the usual quiet pace. For most people, it was just another day. But at Accurate Energetic Systems, a key military explosives plant, workers were gearing up for a shift that would change everything. Accurate Energetic Systems was no ordinary factory. Its primary focus was the manufacturing of military-grade explosives, including bombs, shells, and other sensitive materials for the U.S. Army, Navy, and commercial demolition contractors. The plant had been operating for years, and while the local community knew it was a significant employer, few understood the risks that came with such volatile work. The plant was strategically located deep in rural Tennessee, far from major population centers, with the belief that isolation would make it safer in case something went wrong. However, this distance from prying eyes would also contribute to the difficulty in providing adequate safety oversight, a fact that would prove disastrous. The factory's operations were critical to the country's defense efforts, especially with ongoing military contracts. Yet, the workers, some of whom were locals who had worked there for years, had grown accustomed to the dangers that came with the job. Explosions were an accepted part of life in the munitions industry, controlled explosions, of course, but no one could have predicted what would unfold that morning. At approximately 7:45 a.m. on October 10, 2025, disaster struck. A massive explosion ripped through the plant, leveling one of its key buildings and sending shockwaves that could be felt for miles. The sound of the blast was deafening, a roar that reverberated through the hills and shook the ground like a thunderclap. For those on the site, the world turned to chaos in an instant. The explosion triggered a series of detonations, causing an even greater chain reaction. Debris was thrown for miles, and the force of the blast set nearby trees and forests ablaze. Buildings were obliterated, and windows shattered in homes up to 15 miles away. The ground trembled as if the earth itself had been struck by a violent force. Rescue teams were immediately dispatched, but the task was far from simple. The fire continued to rage, and the sheer magnitude of the explosion made it difficult for emergency responders to safely enter the area. Explosive materials were still igniting sporadically, creating a hazardous environment that delayed rescue efforts for hours. As first responders arrived on the scene, the scope of the disaster became painfully clear. By mid-afternoon, it was reported that 18 people were still missing, with their whereabouts unknown. These individuals were assumed to be trapped in the rubble or, worse, lost in the initial blast. Among those left behind was one man who would later recount his miraculous escape. A worker at the factory, he had just finished his shift and was about to leave when disaster struck. According to the survivor, his heart just sank when he realized that his co-workers, many of whom had been working in the building closest to the explosion, were caught in the blast. I called my third shift supervisor twice. He's the only one who didn't make it off the property that I can acknowledge, and there was no response. And at that point, my heart just sank, the employee shared in an emotional interview later that day. His escape came down to mere minutes, a narrow window of time between when he left the facility and when the explosion devastated everything in its path. Unfortunately for the others who remained inside, time ran out. The survivor's shock was compounded by the realization that he had narrowly avoided a tragedy that claimed the lives of many of his colleagues. It was a cruel twist of fate. He had walked out just before the explosion, and many of those he worked alongside were gone within seconds. As the rescue operation continued, investigators from the FBI and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives (ATF) arrived to begin their investigation into the cause of the explosion. The priority was to locate the missing workers, but the enormous scale of the blast made it difficult to even pinpoint where to search. Authorities confirmed that the explosion originated from a section of the plant known for storing highly volatile materials. But despite initial assessments, no clear cause was immediately identified. Was it human error? A mechanical failure? Or something more sinister? Investigators were left with more questions than answers. The plant's owners, Accurate Energetic Systems, released a brief statement expressing their sorrow over the tragedy, but details were scarce. The company's lack of transparency would fuel the growing suspicion among local residents that the explosion was preventable. Was there a safety breach? Had proper protocols been followed? Was enough done to ensure the protection of the workers? These questions hung in the air as the search for answers continued. The explosion and its aftermath left the community in shock. McEwen, a town of just over 1,000 people, had been hit hard by the loss of lives and the devastation caused by the blast. The plant was one of the largest employers in the area, and the loss of workers had a profound effect on families who depended on their jobs to survive. In the days following the explosion, local residents held candlelight vigils to honor the victims. The community came together to mourn, to support the grieving families, and to hold on to the hope that answers would eventually come. For many, this tragedy was not just a blow to the factory workers but a blow to the town itself. McEwen's tight-knit atmosphere had been shattered, and the scars of this event would last for years to come. Local government officials expressed concern about the economic fallout. The plant was a major employer, and its closure, even temporarily, would have serious consequences for the local economy. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee and State Representative Jody Barrett offered their condolences to the families and vowed to investigate the incident thoroughly. "I am deeply saddened by the loss of life, and my thoughts are with the families who are affected. We will do everything we can to assist in the recovery and ensure that justice is served," Governor Lee stated in a public address. But even as officials offered support, it became clear that the road to recovery would be long and difficult. The explosion had left behind not just physical damage but psychological scars that would take much longer to heal. As investigators continue to search for answers, many are questioning whether the plant's safety measures were sufficient. Was there negligence on the part of the company or oversight by government regulators? Were corners cut in the pursuit of productivity and profit? And, perhaps most importantly, why had the true dangers of working in a munitions factory been so downplayed by both the plant and the authorities? The investigation is ongoing, but one thing is clear: this tragedy cannot be swept under the rug. It serves as a grim reminder of the risks that come with manufacturing dangerous materials and the human lives that can be lost in an instant when safety measures are not prioritized. The Tennessee bomb factory explosion was not just a random accident, it was a preventable disaster that has left an entire community reeling. It's a story of loss, of lives cut short, and of the miraculous escape of one man who found himself lucky, yet haunted by the lives lost around him. As we wait for answers, we are reminded of the dangers lurking beneath the surface in industries that deal with explosive materials. The lives of the 18 missing workers remain in limbo, their families desperate for closure. And for the survivor, the horror of that day will never leave him. If you found this story heartbreaking and compelling, please like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth investigations into the untold stories that shape our world.